Hey guys, and welcome to the last part of Cognitive Psychology, Unit 5, Part 5. We're going to be finishing up talking about memory and how we get memories out and all that kind of information. First off, we have retrieval cues. We have two different types of ways we retrieve information through recall, like essays, where you have a question and you have to recall the information from your brain, or recognition, where it's multiple choice and you kind of just recognize one of the answers from information you already have. Sometimes that information is presented in a different format that you guys have to interpret. Other special cases tend to be where there's reconstructed memory retrieval, where you kind of maybe are in a hypnosis and we don't talk about that anymore, but you could pull up that information. Autobiographical memories are throughout like a lifetime reminiscence bump. It's an effect that adults remember more events from the second and third decades of their life than from other decades. So you tend to remember your 20s and your 30s more so than any other decade. Emotional memories, flashbulb memories, are super emotionally significant, and they're more vivid, and they can be both positive or negative events that happened. You guys know a lot about my life, and you guys know that I had very traumatic events happen in my childhood, and those are very, very vivid. I could tell you exactly where I was sitting or standing when I saw some of the things that happened as a child. Other really positive ones, I remember my wedding day to a T. It was such a great day. It was so beautiful. However, with traumatic events, there can be some inaccuracies because with the different levels of your hormone or stress hormones, it might kind of like hide or distort information just to protect you. And that's kind of where we get our repressed memories. And it's kind of like motivated forgetting, where it's our defense mechanism to be like, hey, it's okay. We'll get that information later when we talk about it later, but like your safety's first. False memory recovery. We see this often with childhood sexual abuse cases, especially with memory not being formed a ton, and us not remembering our memories as much in the early, before the 20s. Information might get misconstrued, or adults might say, hey, no, like, these things probably didn't happen to you. But we do know, and through research, that abuse is under-acknowledged. A lot of people don't go about saying anything. Most victims remember some parts. And memory loss from abuse is very possible. And if you get yourself to believe something else, it sort of becomes true. With eyewitness testimony, there could be distortion. You guys earlier in this unit saw the brain games episode, where the couple stole the purse at the beginning of the episode, and people couldn't really tell who did what. There could be bias. You might have a bias towards people who wear purple shoelaces, and that bias can make you say, oh, the person with purple shoelaces stole the purse. And there could just be some inaccuracy. You weren't paying attention. It wasn't something that was relevant to you. So Ebbinghaus, most of the forgetting occurs soon after we first learn something. So that's why it's super important when you take notes or you learn something, you reread them. Because you want to encode that information. You want to get that information into long-term memory. So you're not really forgetting information, you're just not encoding it. Retrieval failure and interference theory, the theory that people forget not because memories are lost, but because other information gets in the way. And this is where we have proactive and retroactive interference. And I have a question that's at the end that just talks about what's the difference. But proactive is a situation in which material that was learned earlier disrupts the recall from being learned later. And vice versa, retroactive is where material that was learned later disrupts new information from earlier. And here's just a little graphic of proactive versus retroactive. And this image is way more helpful. And I think there's a corny little way to remember this. I'll have to look through my notes to find out for you guys. Alright, so then we have memory failure. The decay theory is just when we learn something new, but we don't really practice it, and over time it just kind of gets lost. And you guys have practiced tip of the tongue phenomenon. You guys had a couple of those song examples, and you wanted to kind of put the fancy saying to the song. You're like, oh, I know it's on the tip of my tongue. There's actually a term for that. Retrospective memory is when you remember things from the past. Prospective memory, remembering to do something in the future, like your to-do list, a clock. Contents, remembering what to do. Timing is when you do it. Amnesia is when we lose our memory, and antegrade amnesia is the ability to store new information, so you're anti-information. Retrograde amnesia is the inability to retrieve past information, so retro, going back in time, you can't think of the past. Redemptive versus contamination stories. Redemptive is more likely to happen in future generations, whereas contamination, people just start to add in different things into stories, and it kind of goes all over the place. Our autobiographical memories kind of help us learn from experience, develop a sense of identity, and bond with others. You see a lot of these autobiographical memories with more close-knit cultures. Memory and aging. Again, the older we get, our mental abilities start to decline. But both being physically and mentally active are super important. We don't want to hinder brain development at a young age. And a lot of these activities that are occurring nowadays are really dampening memory building in your brains. So here's where I just want you guys to write down somewhere the difference between proactive and retroactive amnesia. If you need to look back in your notes, go for it, but see if you can try to come up with a way to remember that, because this is very confusing and it's usually always tested. Hint, hint. And then just some study tips. Reading your notes, whether it's rewriting them or writing them in a different format or Cornell-style note-taking, or just talking over them. Talk to others. If you guys want to know the best way to study, it's teaching others the information you have, even if it's just talking through it. Test yourself. Go back and ask yourself. Cornell notes, again, are super important. Rest and eat well. Use your retrieval cues. And just stay calm, breathe. Just be comfortable. If you're nervous or antsy or anxious, it's hard to just think on the subject matter that you need. But I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you later. Bye.